Hello and welcome to How Did This Not Get Made?
This is a podcast all about movies and television shows that never got made. We are talking about the films that never made it to the screen, the scripts that were never filmed, and the ideas that never even made it to the page. My name is David Spencer.
And my name is Daniel Kaka.
And what are we talking about today, Dan?
All right, so I know that a lot of our friendship hinders on one particular TV show, and that was Community.
Oh, yeah, the show that we totally didn't talk a ton about last week.
Yes. You love Community, I love Community. I recently got my roommate into Community now that it's all on Netflix now.
Wait, it's all on Netflix now?
Yep.
Oh, wait, even the Yahoo season?
I would have to double check that, but yeah.
Don't skip the Yahoo season. The Yahoo season's pretty good.
It is. I enjoy it. But that show was created by Dan Harmon. Now, the show that we are going to be talking about is actually a TV show that shot the pilot, but never actually went on from there. The pilot never aired. But the TV show that we're talking about is called Heat, Vision, and Jack.
Yes.
3, 2, 1, ignition.
Jack Austin, astronaut. Exposed to inappropriate levels of solar energy.
Sunlight makes him the world's smartest man.
I know everything! I want that brain taken out.
Heat Vision, the motorcycle with the mind of Jack's unemployed roommate. Together they run for their lives, blocked at every turn by adventure.
Move out, don't mess around. Move out, you bring me down. Move out, have to get about. Don't make the sound and move out.
Knowledge is power. For real.
This is one of those, legendary in obscure nerd lore. This is one of those, legendary stories of Dan Harmon's failed TV pilot. And this is, in the late 90s, 99. Well, I'm sure you'll give us a year once we get into this. I'm just curious, though, before you start getting into the story, had you seen the pilot prior to doing this episode?
Yes, I have. Actually, I saw it at your place. You were having a party, and
we watched Heat, Vision, and Jack at my place?
Yeah,
I don't remember that at all.
We got pretty drunk. And
I mean, it sounds like something that would happen at my place is, hey, guys, let's watch Heat, Vision, and Jack right now.
Yeah, we had somehow gotten on the subject of Dan Harmon, and you're like, you guys, we have to watch Heat, Vision, and Jack. It's all on YouTube. We got to watch the show.
I don't remember when I first learned about it, but it is one of those stories that I always love pulling up, and whenever somebody hasn't heard of it, it's always fun to watch this, and people be like, this was a thing? How did this not get made?
Yes. Yeah, with Dan Harmon, though, he's been quite an inspiration to me. I mentioned before the web series that I'd done when I first moved out here. When I was creating the web series, I was trying to look into different structures into how to actually manage the storylines. And I remember this one article that came out by Wired Magazine. You can actually read it on their website. The name of the article is called How Dan Harmon Drives Himself Crazy Making Community. And it is a fascinating look into how he actually lays out a story. He has what, I guess it's just a circle or this wheel.
Oh, yeah, the story circle.
Yeah. And
or story wheel.
There's 8 different points to it. First one being a character is in a comfort zone. Point number 2, they want something. Point number 3, they enter an unfamiliar situation. Number 4, they adapt to it. Then they get what they wanted, but they pay a heavy price for it. They return back to a familiar situation, but they have changed.
It's very like hero's journey, the theories behind story structures and what makes story structures work.
Yeah. It's a fascinating look. Definitely read the article if you can, because it really helps you like lay out. And once you know the circle, like you not only will you recognize it in all of Dan Harmon's works. So like if you watch Rick and Morty now, that circle is definitely present there, but you start to see it in just like almost every TV show.
A lot of people do unconsciously, just because the types of structure that have been repeated in stories for centuries, for as long as, human imagination has been a thing.
Yeah.
Dan Harmon is just putting a name to it and putting definitions to it and like defining a law of physics.
Yeah.
And I love the title of that article as well, how Dan Harmon drives himself crazy. There's got to be nobody who works harder in the city of Los Angeles than Dan Harmon's therapist.
Yeah. Oh, jeez. Yeah. In that article, with that circle, the way it works is he will structure the episode in the circle, but then outside of that, he will structure the circle to each individual main character, and then he will structure that circle within the season as well. So if there's a seasonal arc, you got to figure out how that fits in, and then all those little circles like need to fit into that big circle that makes the entire season. And if you start thinking about it that way,
it circles all the way down, man.
Yeah, it'll definitely give you a headache just like trying to think of the structure of that. Now try applying an actual TV show into it.
Yeah. I love learning about people's like crazy systems for that. Like this is a little off subject, but do you ever hear about how Joss Whedon wrote The Avengers and like how he like planned out that script?
I have not.
Basically, he made a big chart of, I think he just did it with like the 6 main Avengers, and he might have like had Coulson and Nick Fury on this chart as well. Basically a grid of each name going across and down, and with each box just said what their relationship is to everybody else. And he wanted to make sure every single character had one person that they thought was great and they got along great with, and another person who they absolutely hated. But also figured out what every single character thought of every single other character and made sure that each of those relationships was different and distinct. And it's something you can really feel in that movie. And I think one of the reasons that movie works so well is that it does feel like every character has a distinct relationship with each character.
That's interesting. That reminds me a lot of Scott Pilgrim versus the World. You had Edgar Wright, who is establishing the different relationships between all the characters, and you can definitely tell the dynamics in there. But one thing that he likes to do is that he likes to give his characters secrets that they have. So Aubrey Plaza, she was on, I think, Doug Loves Movies, and Edgar Wright was on that as well. I'm pretty sure it was that episode. Yeah, I could be wrong. But in the episode, she reveals the secret that she got from Edgar Wright while shooting the film. And the secret that she had to hide from all the other characters was that she secretly had a crush on Scott.
I love that. I love like all the thought of the subtext and stuff. It's very much like game masters for like D&D and pen and paper RPGs will like figure out different ways of doing backstory like that, of keeping secrets and stuff. I remember hearing one story of a guy who wanted to have like all the characters in the party would know something about each other, but he didn't want the information to be totally accurate. So he had everybody write down on different slips of paper of different facts about their characters, but one of those facts was not true, and then divvy those out to the characters. So you got a fact about each other character in the party, but it might not be true because this is like something your character heard along the way. And like that was a really great way to kick off the, party relationships and stuff.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Wow. So
it's so cool the systems you can use like that.
Yes. All right. So I'm going to start steering us back on track, but I love talking about like structures that
absolutely
people have in hearing about like hero's journey structure and all that stuff. But
yeah,
we'll definitely dive more and more into that later as we do the show. But let's go back to Heat, Vision, and Jack. Let's go through a quick summary here. Heat, Vision, and Jack. It starred Jack Black as the super intelligent former astronaut Jack Austin, Owen Wilson as Jack's unemployed roommate Doug turned motorcycle, and Ron Silver as himself, but as a villain who works for NASA. The show was created by Rob Schrab and Dan Harmon, who both have worked on notable projects like the movie Monster House, Channel 101, the Sarah Silverman program, Community, and the podcast Harmontown. The pilot was directed by Ben Stiller, and the show was set to premiere on Fox sometime in 1999. The episode, although completed, never made it to air, but it has been released online and has grown an internet cult following.
How high did your rocket ship take you before you got totally baked?
I think it's interesting when you look at the timeline of the careers of these actors. Obviously, Ben Stiller was pretty established at that point. Jack Black, this was like early days Jack Black. He was doing Tenacious D, but this was before High Fidelity, which I always think of as one of like the big things that solidified him as something, a character people will look for, and definitely before things like
School of Rock.
Yeah, School of Rock. That was like probably his his first real big leading performance. Yeah. And Owen Wilson, I'm trying to look up Owen Wilson as well, but I feel like this would have been early on in his career as well. I mean, this would have been after Bottle Rocket and all of that.
Yeah, because I feel like with Owen Wilson, like he really exploded with Zoolander and whenever he did any Wes Anderson films as well. But yeah, like at the time, they weren't really big. I think Ben Stiller was probably the biggest name attached to this project because he came from doing his own show on Fox. He also did the movie Reality Bites, which he directed as well. Yeah, he was pretty well known then.
Yeah.
Okay, but I'm going to back it up and just mostly focus on Dan Harmon and Rob Schrab and kind of how they got started. So Dan Harmon and Rob Schrab have been longtime writing partners. In fact, the project that brought Dan to LA was when Rob was trying to adapt the comic Scud, the Disposable Assassin.
Yes.
Yeah, have you...
I know of it. I haven't read it, but I know of the comic.
I was really interested in it, and once I was doing the research for it and found out about Scud, I actually ordered it.
Ah, nice.
It's on its way here, so I'm gonna definitely have a chance to actually read that. But
yeah, and Rob Schrab was the creator of Scud.
Yes, he was. He was the creator of Scud. There's an episode of Community. It's the Dungeons and Dragons episode.
Okay.
There's a really quick shot where like a bunch of these like books, like D&D books, like flash across the screen. It's like Abed, the knower of all things, or something like that. And it shows a bunch of these books just like floating through the air, and their dead center is Scud, the Disposable Assassin.
Nice. That's awesome.
So Rob was in LA, both Rob and Dan. So they were planning on turning this into a feature film. And it was optioned by Oliver Stone's company, Illusion Entertainment. When the two of them arrived in LA, they were told by the executives at Illusion that they did not want them to write the script, as they were seen as just comic book guys. Instead, they hired Alan McElroy, the writer of Halloween 4, to adapt the comic. The project sat in development hell for several years. The rights eventually were given back to Rob Schrab back in the early 2000s. He is now holding on to the story until a deal that has nothing to do with money and everything to do with creative control, which is that's Rob's exact words. In 2004, Schrab attempted to get Scud off the ground again by writing a script made for television, but ran into a lot of development issues again. And then the project still sits on the shelf. If you are curious about the story, though, you can buy the complete anthology on Amazon, and that is exactly what I did.
Go check out Dan's Amazon cart to find out more.
I will be doing live readings of a comic strip. In this panel, we see Scud. After their disappointment with Scud, both Dan and Rob wanted to prove to the studios that they were not just comic book guys, and wrote a spec script for a movie called Big Ant Movie, or BAM, an action comedy about giant ants that take over the world. The script actually landed them an agent and got the attention of Robert Zemeckis, which, if you don't know, he's the guy who's behind Back to the Future, Forrest Gump, Death Becomes Her, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and Romancing the Stone.
And, of course, Welcome to Marwen.
Of course, yes. So after that encounter, they were signed on to a 2-picture deal, and this is where they started to make a lot of their connections, like with people like Joss Whedon, Ben Stiller, Jack Black, MTV, and the Jim Henson Company.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which kind of makes sense when they, in Community, they were all turned into puppets, remember?
That was the gas leak year, so we don't talk about that.
Yes. Big Ant Movie was shut down. Even though it got him a lot of attention, that didn't really go anywhere. So
I imagine it's one of those types of scripts that you would see on the Blacklist.
Yeah,
that is like, oh, this is a really cool idea. Nobody's going to put the money to actually make it, though. But it proves that you're a good writer and will hopefully get you the next job.
Correct. Because a lot of writers here in Los Angeles, or at least working in the movie industry, like your story that you want to make rarely ever gets made. A lot of times studios have the story in mind. They're ready to go. They just need a writer to actually put the pen to the paper.
Yeah.
So that's really what they're trying to do. So after they got the 2-picture deal, Dan and Rob, they started working again. They had 2 script ideas. One of them was Rock Gut. It was about a cowboy mummy. And then there was Black Octopus, which was about an attractive woman that dresses up like a black octopus to rob museums, banks, and her father's friends.
These are like weird high concept, clearly like riffing on 80s B-movie type stuff, or just really strange genre pictures. And that's, definitely going to lead into the concept behind Heat Vision and Jack. And it's really funny when you take that, but compare it to the story wheel, which is this planned out structure that is, within the boundaries of this. I think a lot of people would assume that the type of person who wants the structured story wheel story would not be the same kind of person who wants to make a TV show about a woman who dresses up like an octopus. It's one of those things that proves that you have to know the rules before you can break them and know which rules are worth following and which ones aren't.
No, I completely agree with that. Like, it was Arnold Schwarzenegger who said, like, yeah, take the rules and break it. And I always didn't like that statement, or at least the way that he phrased it, but there's a different way of approaching that type of statement by, like, not breaking the rules entirely, but, like, knowing how it works and then bending the rules to make it work in your way.
Yeah, and and realizing the effect that you have when you break those rules, so you break them intentionally. It's like the whole 180-degree rule in filming, where you never want the camera to cross that 180-degree line. And there are some times where movies do that, but when they do it, it's because the filmmaker knows that this is going to be jarring for the audience and is trying to work with it.
Yes. In fact, Malcolm Gladwell, he wrote a whole book called Outliers, which is fascinating, but there was one story in there about a grade school basketball team and how this coach took the approach of how to play basketball. He was noticing that this team was losing, like constantly, always losing, and he stepped in as the coach, and he realized, like, these are just grade school kids. Like, they're not trying to learn the official strategies of basketball because they're kids. They're not going to understand that. So the way that he figured out how to win every game was that he said, hey, if someone else on the other team has the ball, everyone go after that one person. And when he introduced that, which there was nothing illegal about that in the rules, because he introduced that rule, knowing the type of players that he was dealing with, that team started winning every single game, and they were pretty much unstoppable after he did that. But he realized and recognized the circumstances that he was in. He knew the rules, and yet he broke it in a way, but yet still stayed within the parameters.
Yeah, absolutely.
But this brings us up to the next one. We know that Rock Gut Black Octopus, they were not made into movies. They were just pitched, but they didn't like it. But Robert Zemeckis did like one idea, and that was the pitch for the movie Monster House.
The house grabs things and pulls them in and eats them.
We'll see you later. Monster House.
Yeah. Now, this is crazy because I remember Monster House coming out. I remember the whole kerfuffle behind that letter that Dan Harmon wrote about Monster House. I did not realize how long ago they actually did this. So this is around, the early 90s, early to mid 90s is when they pitched it. Monster House sat in development hell for 8 years and then was released in 2006. So, 1998, I think, is when it was greenlit, and it just took them forever to finally put that together.
And, of course, released as an animated kids movie, and I'm not sure how much of that is similar to the script that Dan Harmon and Rob Schrab would have initially turned in.
So, this thing went through rewrite and rewrite. Do you know about the letter that Dan Harmon received from this mother? Her name is Kelly.
No, I don't think I know about this story.
Okay, so I actually have the full thing here. Okay, so here's what it says. Dear Dan, Salinger has watched Monster House twice now. Both times she has been plagued by nightmares for at least a week following the viewings. She only watched the second time because she was struck by the fact that 4-year-old Henry was completely unfazed by it and figured it couldn't have been so scary. And then this is a conversation between her and her daughter. What is the part that scares you so badly? That the woman is so evil that even after she's dead and none of the kids care about teasing her anymore, she turns into a house and chases them. She's too crazy. That's pure evil. Is it the animation that's creepy? No, it's scary that someone is so mean that they could come back from the dead, become something that should not be alive, and then try to kill people. I think it's awesome. That's what Henry said, the 4-year-old not fazed by it. It's been 3 nights of her waking up crying, and I totally blame you. You should come over and rationalize the entire thing to her. Okay, maybe you could just write her a note because she doesn't believe I know the creator of her nightmares. This is from Kelly. Dan eventually got this letter, and he did actually respond to this. And what he came back with was actually pretty interesting. Dear Salinger, your mom told me about Monster House scaring you. It sounds like one of the things that upset you is the fact that the house kept wanting to hurt people even after nobody wanted to hurt it anymore. I will tell you a secret that sounds so silly. You might not believe it, but it is true. I never finished writing Monster House before my bosses turned it into a movie. And then different writers, people I don't even know, changed the story in lots of ways. The movie that you saw was not the story I wanted to tell you. I think a good story, even if it's sad or scary while you're watching it, should make you a little less scared after you've seen it. Because even a scary story, if it's a good scary story, takes us into strange, dark places that don't make sense at first. And it helps us see that they do make sense, and therefore not so scary. And that didn't even happen in Monster House. The kids go inside the house, and everything's scary in there, but nothing starts making more sense. I don't know about you, but when I go inside a giant scary monster, I expect to be rewarded for my bravery. There should always be something inside a monster that helps you understand it and makes you less scared of it, and able to make the monster go away. Not a bunch of stuff that makes you more confused and scared. It goes on for a while. I didn't even get like a quarter of the way into it. But
Dan Harmon taking the opportunity to air his grievances.
Oh, yeah. He even goes on to call Gil Kenan a hack and Steven Spielberg a moron.
Oh.
Yeah.
This is my thing with Dan Harmon. I think he's a great writer. Community is still my favorite comedy series ever. But boy, when he talks sometimes, I'm just like, you could be a little full of yourself there, Dan Harmon.
Yeah,
you gotta ease up a little bit.
It's fascinating, like his work and his creation. And it kind of like gives you a little insight into like how Hollywood works, and kind of why we're doing this is because we see the constant interference from the original stories. and why things will work and why movies either don't get made or end up being a bad movie overall.
Yeah.
But they were still trying to just get something off the ground. It's still in the 90s. Nothing's happening. I mean, Monster House got greenlit, kind of, but they saw that nothing was really happening of it. So after just getting pummeled and just getting rejected, they were just having no luck with movies. And that's when Dan and Rob decided to take a stab at television. And that's when they developed the script for Heat Vision and Jack.
Doug died that day and Heat Vision was born.
Like we mentioned before, Heat Vision and Jack, you can watch the entire episode on YouTube.
Mm-hmm. No attempts to take it down.
Nope. It's about 30 minutes long. I am going to do just a quick plot summary of the pilot. Let's buckle in. We start with an intro with a sarcastic and slightly bitter Ben Stiller, who directed the pilot. He describes how Fox canceled his own show, The Ben Stiller Show, despite having won an Emmy. He also bashes George Lucas for never having won an Emmy.
And that's a promise you won't be hearing from Georgie Lucas. Hey there, Mr. Beard. How many Emmys do you have?
Has he?
George Lucas, what would he have won an Emmy for?
For Clone Wars?
You know, Clone Wars, I know, has won a daytime Emmy.
I know that George Lucas is no longer in the Directors Guild, which I feel like may disqualify him from winning any more awards.
Oh, that's a good point.
Who's it? Robert Rodriguez is one of the only other few directors who have been kicked out of the Directors Guild.
I was just listening to a podcast. They were interviewing somebody who did special effects on Revenge of the Sith and talking about how when they recorded all of Frank Oz's dialogue and James Earl Jones's little bits of Vader dialogue, they had to fly everybody to Bermuda because George Lucas is not allowed to direct on American soil. And
Really?
and there was even one time where they had to do like some pickup takes, and George Lucas was there in the room, like pick up stuff at ILM Studios, but he was not allowed to give any notes while they were filming and recording because he was not allowed to direct on American soil. And so, like, that's why all the prequels were filmed in Australia. And that's the whole reason why he didn't direct 5 and 6.
The reason why he got kicked out of the guild is because at the time, movies required that you have to have credits in the beginning of the movie. And he refused. He said, no, I want the scrolling text. I don't want to put any credits, not until the very end. And because of that decision, that's the reason why he got kicked out.
I believe even it went as far as to on Return of the Jedi. This is all just trying to recall this from memory, so I could be totally off base. But I believe they even said that the production couldn't have a director in the guild working on that Star Wars production at all. So he was, Spielberg was talked about to direct Return of the Jedi. David Lynch as well was talked about to direct Return of the Jedi, but neither of them could do it because they were both in the Directors Guild. So he got television director Richard Marquand to direct Return of the Jedi because he was not DGA.
That's interesting. Yeah, and I know with Robert Rodriguez, the reason why he got kicked out of the DGA was because of doing Sin City. He wanted Frank Miller on as a co-director, and the studio only would allow that he would be a executive producer. He was already an executive producer because he owned the property for Sin City. They didn't want this to happen. They just kicked him out. Because he got kicked out, that's the only reason why Sin City is actually directed by both Robert Rodriguez and Frank Miller. I kind of understand why, because there is a rule for productions as to why you don't have executive producers as the director. Because if someone's fronting the money, they could be like, oh, and then I'm going to direct, and thus all the creative decisions are made by me, the person providing all the money for this production.
Like the reasons those rules exist, do come from logical places. Not the Directors Guild is not an evil force here. There's a legitimate concern to keep studios from hiring non-union folks to direct their projects. It's interesting.
All right, so let's keep going with the summary. So we open on a diner closing up. The line cook, played by Vincent Schiavelli, has been possessed by Paragon, an alien life form hell-bent on taking over the world at any cost, when he slaps the possessed malfunctioning radio. Opening credits, explaining a quick summary of who Jack Austin, Heat Vision, and Ron Silver is. Knowledge is power, for real. And I love that it opens on episode 14.
Yeah.
Eyes of Paragon.
Well, it's so clear that this is like heavily inspired by like 80s action television shows like The A-Team, where, you know, every episode is a standalone story and they recap the intro every single time. And, you know, we'll get into it later when he is like telling his backstory. And that's something that TV shows of the era would constantly have the characters retelling their backstory over and over and over again.
Hey, remember when I was human and we ran out of gas in Tijuana and we got smashed on that cheap tequila, and then you woke up with a 72-year-old woman and she followed us to the border and the police wouldn't let you back into America until you kissed her in front of everybody? And I had to...
So then there's Heat Vision, voiced by Owen Wilson, and Jack, played by Jack Black. They've stopped at a gas station / diner for gas to discover a crime scene. The words "Kneel before Paragon" are written on the walls, and ashes of the waitress are discovered in a neat pile on the floor. Jack is held up by a sheriff, played by Kristen Taylor, who wrongfully accused, arrested, and held him in jail. Do you know if Kristen Taylor was married to Ben Stiller at the time?
Wait, she was or is married to Ben Stiller?
Yeah.
She has been married to Ben Stiller since May 13th, 2000.
Oh, so I guess maybe they met on the show?
Maybe.
Interesting.
Oh, and of course, she's Sally Sitwell in Arrested Development.
Tell me your name.
I can't do that.
Spoken like a criminal. Maybe I'll place a call to your employers.
Who?
NASA?
Wait, please. You'll put us both in grave danger. Don't call them.
So Jack can't reveal his identity, and when the sheriff threatens to call his employer, NASA, Jack warns her not to. They've been after him ever since the accident that exposed him to solar radiation that expanded his brain and made him super smart. He can only attain his super smart abilities only while the sun is present, but not at night. He escaped when he learned that NASA was going to remove his brain. Now he's being chased down by Ron Silver. Yes, the former astronaut and actor Ron Silver.
You were a bad guy in time, cop.
Yeah, well, acting is one of my more enjoyable diversions.
The sheriff does not believe him.
Such a brilliant, weird choice to have actor Ron Silver playing himself, but he's also an agent of NASA.
Yes. It's kind of like with episodes, they have Matt LeBlanc on there playing himself as Matt LeBlanc, but I think it was some interview that I listened to. I think it might have been on Conan, but Conan had asked, I watch you on episodes, like, are you really that interesting? He's like, no, my life is pretty uneventful. I wish my life was like that. All right, so the sheriff is called to another crime scene in a motel booked by a Bob Paragon. Jack warns her about Paragon and lets her know that he will be escaping by sunrise.
Come sunrise, I'll be so intelligent no cell will be able to hold me.
The crime scene investigator finds that 6 prostitutes have been completely dehydrated before they perished. Ron Silver arrives on the scene. He's looking for Jack Austin. The sheriff realizes Jack has been telling the truth. The sun rises, giving Jack the intelligence to break out of jail. The sheriff and Ron Silver arrive back to the jail cell to discover he escaped. Ron is angered by this. Heat Vision and Jack return back to the gas station / diner. Heat Vision is enjoying getting filled up with gas. Jack is working on how to capture and destroy Paragon. Heat Vision encounters Paragon when he asks for directions to the Sunken Pleasure.
Give me directions to the Sunken Pleasure.
I'm from out of town, buddy. I really can't help you. Push on.
Paragon tries to destroy them with his eyes and escapes. Heat Vision is knocked over. The sheriff arrives to tell Jack that Ron Silver has tracked him down. Jack, Heat Vision, and the sheriff hide out at her grandmother's place. As Heat Vision plays with the kids in the front yard, the sheriff asks how Jack had built him, and Jack explains it was all an accident. It was his unemployed roommate Doug that tried to help him escape. He arrived at NASA on his motorcycle just as Jack was about to be shot with an experimental ray gun. Jack jumped out of the way, but the ray gun hit Doug, merging him with his bike. The sheriff falls in love with Jack after he explains his story. They kiss and sleep together. She wakes up to heat vision watching Doctor Who, but Jack is gone.
And of course, she comes out just completely wrapped in a blanket.
Yeah.
Like, didn't put on any clothes, but has just decided to bring out her entire comforter, like big, thick blanket, and wrap that around herself and sit in the living room.
Oh, yeah. There's definitely a lot of problems with her. Big one is that she doesn't even have a name.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they just refer to her as Sheriff.
And that's it. Even on the IMDb credits, her character name is just Sheriff. That's it. So there's quite a few problems with that. Jack has created a device that'll entrap Paragon inside of a radio when it's recording. He explains that Paragon can only destroy people with eyes, which is why he couldn't destroy heat vision.
Channel. That's why I couldn't turn heat vision into ashes. Heat got no eyes.
It's true. I don't have any eyes.
Heat vision says that Paragon was looking for a sunken treasure, but the sheriff figures out that instead he wants to go to the Sunken Pleasure, a strip club. Paragon begins disintegrating people in the strip club. Jack, Heat Vision, and Sheriff burst through the window to fight Paragon. Jack makes sure to cover his eyes, first with glasses, then a stripper's bra after having ripped them off of his face. Yeah. The DJ, played by Ben Stiller, continues to play music, switching from Metallica's King Nothing to Led Zeppelin's Kashmir. Ron Silver arrives but is knocked down by the sheriff with Jack's device to trap Paragon and by heat vision, distracting Jack from defeating Paragon. Jack is thrown across the stage, knocking the stripper pole into a speaker. The sheriff arrests Silver and shoots at Paragon, but her bullets are no use. Paragon touches the pole currently lodged in the speaker. Jack yells to the DJ, "Press record!" This then traps Paragon inside of a cassette tape. The day is saved. Jack and the sheriff step outside as the sun is setting. Jack tries to explain the danger of Paragon, but as the sun is setting, so does his superintelligence. Jack eventually tells her just to throw it away. Sheriff asks Jack to stay and that she could help him.
If you stay, I could help you.
In the past, I've tried to tell my story to journalists. I've tried to make friends. I've tried to open up to women. They've died.
Then Heat Vision and Jack ride off into the sunset. The sheriff goes back into the strip club to deal with Ron Silver, but he's escaped.
You can't run forever, Jack. Not from death. Not from your shadow. Not from Ron Silver.
And that's the first episode.
Amazing. There's so much of this that feels very much like a show we mentioned last week, Garth Marenghi's Dark Place, that it is this semi-parody of like 80s TV. But the weird thing about this one is that they're calling attention to the making of, like that Ben Stiller intro is very much a Garth Marenghi Dark Place type intro, except this is actually Ben Stiller as himself telling the truth about his own life and the creation of the show. Obviously, a heightened version and poking fun at things, but like having Ben Stiller play the DJ as well is one of those just really weird decisions that makes the whole show like feel really, really special.
Yeah. I'm wondering though with the intro with Ben Stiller if that was actually supposed to be included in the pilot itself.
I feel like it had to have been.
Because knowing how long TV shows are supposed to be, like at the time, around the 90s, that's when
true.
TV shows were around like 24 minutes long.
That's true.
To make room for commercials, and this being 30 minutes long on YouTube, I feel like that might have been just kind of a last fuck you, knowing that this was not going to air. So they're like, you know what, let's just have fun with this.
That's fair.
So,
that's fair.
Yeah, there was no information really explaining that, so that's why I don't know. The episode was made. Everything was set up, ready to go, but Fox eventually passed on the show. The rights were given to one of the Zucker brothers. Yeah, one of the guys who were behind the Naked Gun series, Airplane, and Top Secret. Dan and Rob were under contract to make a movie based on Heat Vision. After submitting a draft, they walked away from the project thinking that it was not in the right hands. In 2005, there was a rumor of a Heat Vision movie being made, and all those involved were actually signed on to make it. But since the pilot in 1999, all of them have gotten a lot bigger, and they were just all way too busy to actually create the show, like we were mentioning before when we started the episode. There was talk about it being a web series back in 2010, but again, if it happened, we would have known about it, but it just hasn't happened.
Now, I'm not sure if you found out about this, but the stories I heard, it was always that they wrote the script and there was a big bidding war among all of like the networks, that everybody wanted this script and this project. And then Fox was the one who picked it up, but then after making the pilot decided not to go forward. Did you find anything about there was a bidding war or anything like that?
I did find a quote from Dan Harmon about this whole situation. When Rob Schrab called me on his way home one day, he said, "We've got to get out of this blind deal with ABC we stumbled into. How do we do that?" And we decided that we've got to write our favorite TV show ever because they'd hate it. We have to write something fucking ridiculous that makes us so happy. We have to be laughing the whole time we're writing it. Rob called me 5 minutes after leaving that discussion and said, "What if Jack Black was an astronaut?" and proceeded to describe the entire concept. And I just thought, that's perfect. A day and a half later, we'd written the first draft of that thing and was reading it to Rob off the computer screen, and we were just cracking up. We spent another half day polishing it, and 3 hours after that, we had about 200 ideas for episodes. It was like cheating. And we really only did it to scare off ABC because we'd stumble into a blind deal, which is a ridiculously long story, but we felt that we were feature writers trapped in an accidental blind deal with this TV network that didn't like us. So we just had to use that thing. We gave it to them and said, "Here's our thing for our blind deal." And soon enough, they bought us out of our contract after taking one look at Heat Vision and Jack. We couldn't have anticipated that 10 minutes later, Ben Stiller's on the phone from the set of Mystery Men, jumping up and down in his leather pants going, "This is the funniest fucking thing I've seen in my fucking life." Because Ben Stiller, at that point in time, was something about Mary Ben Stiller. The phone did not stop ringing. We were nobodies at the time, and we were never this much somebody ever again. It was just phone call after phone call after phone call. Everybody wanted us to make sure that we knew we were always in our corner. Several studios and networks wanted to talk about making it into a show, and it was pretty crazy. So, yeah, that's the tidbit of evidence right there supporting your statement. So, yeah.
Yeah, interesting. I also think it's funny how he says, like, they never had that popularity again. Do you know when that quote was that he said that?
That was 2012.
Okay, so this would have been after Community, but before Rick and Morty, which is probably one of the most popular animated television shows for adults on right now. Without a doubt, and especially with how much friggin' merchandising that show has.
Oh my God,
It is so Hollywood that this guy who is running an extremely successful NBC comedy says that the time that he was like the most sought after commodity was when they had this pilot that didn't even make it to series. The script of a pilot, which just goes to show you that like everybody in Hollywood is chasing the next new thing, but even when something is established, that they're like, we don't need that anymore.
Yeah. This is just kind of like the aftermath of all of that. After the show ended, Dan and Rob started a monthly short film festival called Channel 101, a website where you could submit a 5-minute short. They would be judged, and the top films would be featured on the site. The concept was brought to the attention of FX to make this into a show, but it was eventually rejected. Harmon and Schrab eventually worked on the Sarah Silverman program. In 2007, FX turned Channel 101 into a TV show, but it is vastly different from what Dan and Rob had originally pitched.
Channel 101 is something so important to the media landscape we are in now. They really were one of those pioneers of online video. One of the biggest series that I can think of from like early internet that I knew about was Chad Vader.
May I speak with you a moment, my master?
It's just Randy, okay, Chad?
Yes, my master.
And don't kneel, it's weird.
Chad Vader came through Channel 101. There's a lot of early internet content creators that came from doing stuff with Channel 101. And, you know, this is something that if you go into the archives of Thank You Internet that I did with Michael, we talked to Aaron Yonda, one of the co-creators of Chad Vader, and we get a little bit into the history of Channel 101 and all of that. It's one of those things that shows that Dan Harmon and Rob Schrab really were ahead of the curve and ahead of the game as to how the internet was going to change media and the type of content that would be out there because of internet media. Because Channel 101 was a celebration of the weird and the, like, just random and the stuff that would not make it onto actual TV, but it had a home on Channel 101, which is so much of the calling card of the way internet entertainment developed.
And I imagine that a lot of this was a fuck you to the studios to say, hey, we have to jump through the hoops just to get some kind of content on the air. And if anything, we're probably going to get, I don't know, maybe a few hours, and we're going to be sporadically on television, where we can actually create a website where not only can we feature our own content, because this is where they were making a lot of their own stuff. Like, I remember Computer Man, I remember Laser Farts. They could actually just kind of go off, make their ridiculous stuff, and actually have a platform to put it on that people would actually watch and want to look at. And yeah, it really shaped their writing style and how to actually form and create content. Yeah, any interview that I've heard with Dan Harmon, he always goes back to Channel 101 as this one platform where he learned the most about writing stories and making stories.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I think it also is interesting in how it ties into, like, Dan Harmon's podcast and Harmontown and that whole scene, and, like, how that all kind of leads into each other. The Ouroboros that is Dan Harmon's career.
Yes. Whew. That's a lot to take in. So that's why I only focus mostly on the first, more boring half.
Yeah. There is definitely a lot that can be said about modern-day Dan Harmon. Most of my opinions on Dan Harmon comes from my complicated feelings around Rick and Morty, but we don't need to get into that.
We don't.
I love Community, though. Community is still incredible. You know, speaking of Community, Heat Vision and Jack is very reminiscent of Kick Puncher. You know, where Kick Puncher is the 80s movies of the time, like Terminator, whereas Heat Vision and Jack is Knight Rider and Incredible Hulk and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that is one of the weird things about Heat Vision and Jack is that it's filmed and written to look like a television show made in the 80s, but with the, you know, Ron Silver playing Ron Silver, the show knows that it is a show made in 1999. I think that, like, disconnect is funny, but also I think could lead to why it may not have worked as a series, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Jack says the Earth's shape is mankind's curse because we can never reach our horizon. I say a round planet is a gift. We can move forward forever, find a different horizon every week.
I want to ask, I think this is a pretty obvious answer, but do you wish this made it to full series?
I do.
Of course, right?
Yeah.
How could you not want to? Like, everybody behind this is incredible, and for everybody except Ben Stiller, this was, like, before they became huge, and it would have been incredible. It would have been such a great show.
Like, if anything, I would want maybe 1 or 2 seasons of this.
I don't think it would have lasted longer than 1 or 2 seasons. I'm sure, like, especially Fox, everybody knows how Fox is and how they like to let TV shows get canceled in the early aughts.
Like, it seems, I don't know. I mean, looking at Rick and Morty, though, this kind of proves me wrong, but it seems like a high concept, a ridiculous concept for a TV show that feels more like a sketch rather than a sustainable concept.
That's true. That's very
where
true.
Community feels more like a sustainable concept.
Yeah.
But, I mean, looking at Rick and Morty, that feels like a ridiculous concept that could just be a sketch, and it's lasted now for... they're on their 5th season and still going, and they're still in demand. So,
you know, one interesting thing that this conversation has made me think about Dan Harmon's writing style, like, he seems to be known for being paired with crazy high concept projects, but in those cases, it's always the other person he's working with that seems more responsible for the craziness, whereas he is more responsible for bringing the structure in. And like Community is very much about this. You have this very structured story and character dynamics of the classmates, but then they get to throw them into different wild genres and play with those genres, but with this grounded skeleton of a structure around it. With Heat Vision and Jack, Rob Schrab is known for doing Scud and like the crazy weird genre stuff, and it seems like Dan Harmon's role in that was to figure out a way to actually like make it work structurally. And it's similar with Rick and Morty. I think Justin Roiland is probably responsible for a lot of the craziest ideas in there, but Dan Harmon is the one who like ties the story together.
He does. Yeah, he's basically just given puzzle pieces and he has to figure out where they go.
With Rick and Morty, what I think is the best episode of that TV show, and I think the most emblematic of Dan Harmon and Justin Roiland, is the first interdimensional cable episode in the first season, because you have all of these random weird sketches that were done by just Justin Roiland improving in the booth, and like it's so Justin Roiland, but then at the end of that episode, you get the Morty speech to Summer, everything is awful, nothing matters, come watch TV. And that is such a Dan Harmon thing to do.
With Jerry and Beth, like bringing those two together with what seems like just a ridiculous off-the-cuff sketch of Jerry being a well-known actor to find out, like, no, this is actually setting up a pretty good love story between him and Beth. And it's just... like, it brings a tear to your eye.
Well, with all of the Jerry Beth stuff in those first two seasons, I haven't really watched much past season 2, but in those first two seasons, that is such story circle. Like, every episode, something happens with them where it looks like they're going to split up, and then by the end of the episode, they're together again, having changed. Yeah. And it's so story circle for those characters in a really obvious way.
You can definitely see where Dan Harmon like definitely leaves his mark.
Absolutely.
Is in the structure.
The fact that people saved Heat Vision and Jack, the fact that I heard them laughing at it, is what really very directly caused Channel 101 to happen. Channel 101 was a way of receding back from television and its system into just following our bliss.
We're looking at Dan Harmon's career, and had this actually been made, what would have changed? Like, I already know, like, Channel 101 probably would have never been made.
Yeah,
had
that's
this show
true.
actually been going.
That is very true, and that is a sad thought to think that of Channel 101 not being made, because it did spawn so many amazing things. And also, I wonder, if he would have made a show like Community, if he would have been known as a genre guy. If Heat Vision and Jack was made, I don't know if he would have made a television show that was a more grounded in reality, people going to college type series.
You probably would have jumped straight from Heat Vision and Jack to something like Rick and Morty.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's so funny how, like, Community is probably one of the biggest things that made Dan Harmon a name that people know, but it is very different than a lot of the rest of his career.
Yeah.
On the flip side, though, Rob Schrab might be a name that everybody knows more. Because right now, like, obviously in the way we're talking about it, we talk more about Dan Harmon because Dan Harmon is, I think, the name that more people know about. Not to say that he is more responsible for Heat Vision and Jack. He has more of a career in film and television that we can, compare and contrast to. I bet you that Rob Schrab would have been just as big of a name if this got made into a full series.
I mean, looking at Rob Schrab's IMDb, like, he's been directing a lot more. Wow. He did 6 episodes of the new MST3K.
Oh, wow. I
Mr.
didn't
Science
know that.
Theater 3000. Yep. He directed 10 episodes of Community. He did I remember him talking about this on Harmontown, but he was working with Lego to create the Lego Movie 4D, A New Adventure, which is featured at Legoland.
Oh, my goodness. He is perfect for anything Lego.
Yeah, he definitely has that, like, wacky, crazy mind where he can kind of go off everywhere. And I guess MST3K, like, that makes sense that he would do something like that as well. Oh man, he did the Mac and Me episode.
Oh, that's awesome.
Oh, that's funny.
Oh wow, he did like most of season 6 of Community. He did 1 episode in season 3, and then he did 3 episodes in season 5 and 6 episodes of season 6, which is half of that season. He did Grifting 101.
Ooh.
And of course he did the finale, the emotional consequences of broadcast television. He did G.I. Jeff. He did probably the best episodes of season 5 and 6, which, if you're a fan of Community and you fell off after season 4, I understand. But if you never came back for season 5 and season 6, do it. It probably isn't quite the same level as those first 3 seasons, but it's still really good.
I mean, we could do this all day. He did an episode of Parks and Rec.
Ah, that's awesome.
He did the camping episode. Wow. Anyway,
yeah.
So we don't have to worry about Dan Harmon or Rob Schrab. It looks like they're doing just fine. Do you have any final thoughts?
It's awesome how any sort of idea, if it's interesting, can find an audience. Maybe not will find an audience, but can find an audience despite it being canceled.
That'll be it.
All right. Well, thank you again, everybody, for listening. Dan, thank you for finding this awesome story.
Of course. Oh, man. Like I said, I had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Researching this, watching the show over and over and over again.
I guess you can go to pipedreampodcast.com to find out more episodes about this show, find out more about this show, and find other shows like it. We would also love to receive emails from you. You can send those emails to notgetmade@gmail.com. Talk to us about movies that you would love us to cover or things that we may have missed. This show is as much about us learning about these stories as it is talking about them, so anything that you have to share, we would love to hear.
You can also connect with us on Twitter at HGTNGM or on Instagram at How Did This Not Get Made.
Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Good night.